Oh, good morning, everyone. Can you hear me okay back there? Good, thank you. I'm Ron Padgett, and I'm going to talk for 5 minutes, and then each of us will talk for 5 minutes, and then we'll talk amongst ourselves, and then if there's time, we'll talk with you as well. However, that last possibility seems rather remote, given especially my tendency to rattle on. I think that looking at the title of today's panel, I think I'm supposed to, quote, represent the New York school, but I don't really feel that I represent much of anything. And that tag, the New York school, or the beat generation, or the language school, I think those are words that critics and professors like to use, but I almost never hear a real poet using those terms because they're so loose and baggy and sort of useless, actually. I don't see how they help poets write poetry at all, and that's what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in theories that don't help me write. I was also asked to, so I want you to just sort of try to forget about that idea of the New York school, if you would. I guess it's naughty of me to begin the panel by undercutting its very basis, but I was asked to also to talk strictly from a personal point of view, and about the things that formed me as a poet. And so I'm going to very quickly run down a list of such things. I was born in Tulsa, Oklahoma in the early 1940s, where there wasn't a lot of highfalutin poetry at all. And so my early influences, coming from a non-literary family, in fact from an outlaw family, my first big influence, I think, was the music of Bob Wills and some of the titles of his songs like San Antonio Rose and Take Me Back to Tulsa. I think also nonsense rhymes as a child. And then my mother listened to lots of records, so I memorized a lot of lyrics, like the lyrics of Cole Porter and Johnny Mercer and Ira Gershwin. Also, my family was Ozark hillbillies who spoke an incredible dialect that almost no one else could understand, so it was a very colorful and interesting and funny language. But when I got to junior high school, I was forced to read Longfellow and Emerson's poetry, which really didn't do anything for me except show me that there was that kind of thing. But I really didn't get sort of turned on to poetry as we think of it until I read Leaves of Grass, The Song of Myself. And about the same time I discovered Howl, Allen Ginsberg's poem, and I was electrified by both of them. And it quickly led me to the poetry of Gregory Corso and Kerouac's prose, and later his poetry. And then I happened across this guy named Rimbaud, which I read in English translation and was completely fascinated by and identified with for about 2 weeks. But then very shortly after that, I discovered William Carlos Williams' writing and Ezra Pound's. Not just Pound's poetry, but also some of his translations from the Chinese and from the Provençal. And those had a big influence on me. About the same time, actually, in 1958, I discovered Robert Creeley and Charles Olson's poetry, which were very impressive in very different ways. And the so-called sort of Black Mountain poetry, but that's a term I don't think is very useful either. But at the same time, I was very enamored by the poetry of Kenneth Patchen, partly because he was published by New Directions Publishing Company, which I seem to like everything they published. And also I discovered Langston Hughes and E.E. Cummings. But the really, really big influences on me were two folk musicians, Hughie Ledbetter and Woody Guthrie, both of whom I absolutely idolized from every point of view. And then I have to say, Leroy Jones, the early poetry of Amiri Baraka was a big influence on me. And I must add, though strange as it may seem, that Gary Snyder was a big influence on me as well. But then I discovered Elizabethan literature and went crazy over Sir Philip Sidney and Christopher Marlowe and Ben Jonson, and then later John Donne, and Alexander Pope later, and then I absolutely fell in love with Seishonagon and Tu Fu and the Diamond Sutra. So does all that add up to the New York School? I don't think so. Later, of course, I became crazy about Frank O'Hara's work and John Ashbery and Kenneth Koch and James Schuyler and others, but I don't think they were as formative an influence on me as these other people. And I think I've probably gone over my 5 minutes there. So I will stop.